a man hardened by loss. You've experienced immense loss in your life, your wife, your daughter. How did you identify with the character?
Oh, God, did I lose it? Yeah, there was a certain loss, there was a certain adriftness within my own heart and life and where I was going and what I was doing and how I was going to carry on. There was a certain loss, there was a certain adriftness within my own heart and life and where I was going and what I was doing and how I was going to carry on.
The world. 72. Pierce Brosnan's tragedy is beyond heartbreaking. To the world, he is James Bond, a flawless gentleman spy who never flinches under pressure, who walks away from explosions without a scratch, who always keeps his composure. He represents strength, elegance, and control, but real life doesn't come with stunt doubles, and the man behind the tuxedo has faced battles no script could soften. Behind the fame is a story shaped by abandonment, devastating illness, and losses so cruel they almost seem unreal. How does one survive losing both a wife and a daughter to the same disease? How do you continue forward when the very foundation of your family has been shattered more than once? To understand the depth of his sorrow, you have to begin long before Hollywood ever called his name. Pierce Brosnan was born on May 16, 1953, in Drogheda, Ireland. His earliest memories were not of laughter-filled rooms or steady family dinners. They were of absence. His father left when he was still an infant. There was no dramatic explanation, just a vanishing. Pierce would later admit that he never truly knew the man. He didn't grow up hearing his father's voice or feeling his guidance. Instead, there was a quiet emptiness where a father should have been. His mother, May, loved him deeply, but faced harsh economic realities. Work opportunities in Ireland were scarce, and she made the painful decision to move to London in search of stability. What was meant to be temporary stretched into 7 long years. 7 years of living with relatives. 7 years of watching other children go home to their parents. 7 years of learning how to adapt and how to endure. He stayed with his grandparents in Navan, later with an aunt and uncle in Trim. Each household provided care, but none replaced the comfort of having both parents present. Stability came in fragments, not permanence. Pierce became observant, reserved, self-contained. He learned to protect his emotions, to stand slightly apart. Loneliness became his silent companion. When his mother finally returned and remarried William Carmichael, Pierce experienced something new: consistency. Carmichael offered patience and practical wisdom. He taught Pierce how to fish, how to repair things, how to stand tall. But by then, the early lessons were already carved into him. Love can leave. Stability can disappear. Nothing is guaranteed. Those lessons would shape the man he became, especially the kind of father he would later strive to be. Art became his escape. As a teenager, Pierce discovered acting almost by accident. The stage offered something he had never fully experienced: control. On stage, he wasn't the abandoned child. He was powerful, in command of his narrative. He trained in London, and gradually began securing roles in television and theater. There were struggles, of course. Auditions that went nowhere. Rejections that stung. But rejection was something he understood. He had lived with it since childhood. His breakthrough came with the television series Remington Steele. Suddenly, the world noticed his charm, his poise, his effortless screen presence. But even as his star rose, he remained deeply anchored to family. Because for Pierce Brosnan, fame was never the ultimate prize. Belonging was. And that sense of belonging came in the form of Cassandra Harris. In the late 1970s, Pierce met Cassandra Harris. She was confident, luminous, and already carving her own path as an actress. But what captivated him wasn't her beauty, it was her warmth. Cassandra had 2 children, Charlotte and Christopher. For some men, stepping into an instant family might have felt overwhelming. For Pierce, it felt natural. He knew what it meant to grow up without a father. He had felt that ache. And he was determined that these children would never feel it. He embraced them fully, not as stepchildren, but simply as his children. In December 1980, Pierce and Cassandra married. Their home became filled with life and laughter. In 1983, their son Sean was born, completing the family picture. For the first time in his life, Pierce felt rooted. He wasn't chasing stability anymore, he was living it. He cherished fatherhood. School runs, bedtime stories, quiet family dinners. These moments meant more to him than any red carpet event. Looking at photographs from that era, you can see it in his smile. It wasn't the polished grin of a rising Hollywood star. It was the soft expression of a man who had finally found home. But happiness, as he had learned in childhood, can be fragile. In 1987, Cassandra began feeling unwell. At first, the symptoms seemed minor: fatigue, discomfort. But when medical tests were conducted in London, the truth emerged with devastating clarity: ovarian cancer. The word alone carried unbearable weight. Life shifted instantly. Scripts and premieres were replaced with hospital appointments and treatment schedules. The future they had envisioned, growing old together, became uncertain. For 4 years, Cassandra fought. She endured surgeries, chemotherapy, endless cycles of hope and disappointment. Through it all, Pierce remained by her side. He described himself as her silent partner, always holding her hand, even when fear threatened to consume him. Their son Sean, still very young, once wore a toy doctor's coat and pretended to heal his mother. It was innocent and heartbreaking all at once. Cassandra faced her illness with extraordinary courage. She refused to let it steal her spirit. Even as her body weakened, her grace endured. In December 1991, she passed away. Pierce was 38 years old. A husband burying the love of his life. A father trying to stay strong for 3 children. He had endured childhood abandonment, but this loss felt different, deeper, final. He once said that grief became part of his soul. It didn't disappear, it settled in. In the years following Cassandra's death, Pierce threw himself into work. It wasn't about escaping grief, it was about surviving it. In 1995, he stepped into the iconic role of James Bond, beginning with GoldenEye. The world saw him as invincible, smooth, unbreakable. But behind the scenes, he was still a widower raising children who had lost their mother. The contrast was striking. On screen, he saved the world. At home, he navigated bedtime tears and quiet questions about why their mother wasn't coming back. He officially adopted Charlotte and Christopher after their biological father passed away, solidifying what had long been true in his heart. They were his children, especially Charlotte. She shared a particularly deep bond with him. Their connection carried echoes of the relationship he had once shared with Cassandra: warmth, strength, closeness. He was determined that none of his children would ever feel abandoned, not on his watch. But life had another devastating chapter waiting. More than 2 decades after Cassandra's passing, tragedy struck again. In 2013, Charlotte was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The same disease, the same cruel progression. For Pierce, it felt like history was replaying itself. The hospital rooms, the treatments, the slow, painful realization that medicine could only do so much. Watching his daughter fight the same illness that had taken her mother was almost unbearable. No parent is prepared to lose a child. Charlotte passed away at the age of 41. Pierce had now buried both his wife and his daughter to the same disease. The pain was unimaginable. Yet even in grief, he remained composed publicly. Privately, he described cancer as a cruel and relentless force that devastates families without mercy. At 72, those losses still echo. But his story does not end in despair. Because despite everything, Pierce Brosnan chose to keep living. The second time grief arrived, it did not knock gently. When Charlotte passed away in 2013 after her battle with ovarian cancer, Pierce Brosnan was forced to relive a nightmare he had already endured once before. The hospital corridors, the quiet consultations, the hopeful optimism that slowly turned into unbearable reality. It was all hauntingly familiar. He had once stood beside his wife, Cassandra, through the same struggle. Now he was standing beside his daughter. The same disease, the same helplessness, the same heartbreak. There is something uniquely devastating about losing a child. It defies the natural order of life. Parents are meant to go first. That is how we understand the world. But when that order is reversed, it leaves a fracture that never fully heals. Pierce rarely speaks about his grief in dramatic terms. Instead, he describes it with a quiet heaviness, calling cancer a wretched disease that tears families apart. There is no anger in his tone, only the exhausted sorrow of someone who has witnessed its cruelty, up close, twice. By then, he had already built a second chapter of his life. And that chapter would become his anchor. Years after Cassandra's passing, Pierce met Keely Shea Smith in 1994. She was a journalist, confident and grounded, with a warmth that slowly began to thaw the grief he carried. Their relationship didn't begin in the shadow of tragedy. It began with friendship and patience. Keely understood that Pierce's past would always be part of him. She didn't try to replace it. She respected it. In 2001, they married. With Keely, Pierce found stability once more, not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as a continuation of life. Together they welcomed 2 sons, Dylan and Paris. For Pierce, fatherhood remained sacred. Having grown up without his own father's presence, he was determined to be fully present for his children. School events, vacations, simple family dinners, these moments were never taken for granted. But grief does not vanish just because life moves forward. Cassandra's memory remained alive in their home, Charlotte's memory too. Loss became something woven into the fabric of their family story, not hidden, but honored. At 72, Pierce Brosnan carries more than memories. He carries survival. Losing a spouse is devastating. Losing a child is shattering. Losing both to the same illness is almost beyond comprehension. Many people would retreat inward after such repeated tragedy. Some would grow bitter. Others would crumble entirely. Pierce chose something different. He channeled his grief into quiet strength, into art, into environmental activism, into being a father and husband who understood just how fragile life truly is. In interviews, he often speaks about gratitude, about waking up each day thankful for the people still around him. That perspective did not come from privilege. It came from pain. There is a depth in his eyes now that wasn't there in his early Bond years. It's subtle, but unmistakable. Experience, loss, reflection. To many, he will always be James Bond, the sharp-suited agent with perfect timing and flawless confidence. But the real measure of a man is not how he performs in front of cameras. It is how he endures when no one is watching. Pierce Brosnan endured. A father who disappeared, a childhood divided between relatives, the death of his first wife after a long, painful illness, the devastating loss of his daughter decades later. And through it all, he remained present. He did not abandon his children. He did not retreat permanently from love. He did not allow grief to harden him beyond recognition. Instead, he rebuilt, carefully, deliberately. Fame can create the illusion of invincibility, but Pierce's story reminds us that celebrity offers no shield against disease or death. Behind red carpets and premieres are hospital rooms and funeral services. Behind magazine covers are sleepless nights and unanswered prayers. Yet Pierce has never defined himself solely by tragedy. He continues to work, to paint, to advocate for environmental causes, to support cancer awareness efforts, not loudly, but sincerely. He understands the unpredictability of life better than most. Perhaps that is why he appears calmer now, softer in some ways, stronger in others. Because when you have faced the worst and survived, your definition of strength changes. It is no longer about appearing untouchable. It is about continuing. At 72, Pierce Brosnan's tragedy is beyond heartbreaking, but it is also profoundly human. He is not just a movie icon. He is a man who has buried loved ones and still chosen to love again. He is a father who refused to let his children feel the abandonment he once felt. He is a husband who stood beside his wife through years of suffering without ever stepping away. And he is a parent who endured the unimaginable pain of losing a child and somehow kept moving forward. The world may remember the explosions, the Aston Martins, the unforgettable Bond theme music, but perhaps his greatest legacy is quieter. It is resilience. It is compassion forged through sorrow. It is the understanding that even when life delivers the cruelest blows, you can still choose grace. Pierce Brosnan's story is not simply one of tragedy. It is one of survival, of rebuilding, of carrying grief without allowing it to define you entirely. At 72, the heartbreak is undeniable, but so is the strength. And that strength, not the tuxedo, not the fame, is what truly defines the man behind the legend.